So you think we should have a professional intro?
Yeah, this is supposed to be our professional intro.
I'm going to throw a word at you, and you're going to love this one. And I'm just going to get my drink ready. I'm just going to uncork it
I
because
always feel
I know they're going to have time to drink because this is going to send you in a direction. This is. Are you ready? I'm going to drum roll for you. Trauma.
ah. Ugh. You know what? Actually, I might be a bit nicer than I probably would have been 6 months ago. But maybe that's just because I've been mellowing a bit. I don't know. Right, what about trauma day?
Well, I know when we've talked before,
Yeah.
trauma is one of those words which gets thrown around a lot.
Mm.
Suddenly, everyone has trauma. Everyone has a traumatic experience, which is obviously the reason they are the way they are now.
Mm.
And I know when we've talked, there's been that consensus that it's overused as a term,
Yeah.
and a bit like stress. You know, stress is used a lot now, and not saying there isn't stress out there, but it's something you go back X number of years, and stress wasn't even a thing; it wasn't even talked about, and probably because people didn't recognise the signs and symptoms of it. But there are words which we use now and we almost use universally, and everyone seems to know what it means, but no one can define it.
Well, that tends to happen when you water down something, because essentially the more you use it, the less it has any meaning, doesn't it? If we use trauma to describe everything, then what does it mean? And I know people, I find with trauma, trauma in the mental health emotional space is just essentially is a form of stress. We call it traumatic stress. It's a level of stress that is far too overwhelming for you in any one moment or over a period of time, and it doesn't really resolve itself, so it keeps living on through various symptoms and stuff like that. But what seems to happen is now everyone says they experience trauma, when I think what they mean is they experience stress. So see, whereas all trauma is stress, not all stress is trauma. And I think what happens is that for good reasons, people being more aware of trauma and being trauma informed, whatever the fuck that means, which I would consider myself trauma informed, having looked into it and worked in it, and I work in a trauma informed way, yet feel like the term trauma informed kind of gets thrown around to kind of put down other professionals who are trauma informed, but just because they don't go around calling themselves trauma informed, they're like, oh, you're not trauma informed. Anyway, I can't remember what's going with that, but trauma, it's become, it's just become so watered down that it doesn't really mean a lot, and that's the concern I have. It's like, people say, oh, I've experienced trauma, I've experienced this, but I feel that we're minimizing the vocabulary we actually need to define our experiences so we can actually move forward. Now, of course, you might experience trauma. And there are lots of things that can cause trauma. And if we've grown up in environments where we're not supported, we're not held, we're not given an environment to recover from stress, then that can cause trauma. But people do just throw it around so much now. And it worries me, because I think also what people are often referring to as trauma is conditioning. And obviously this treatment for conditioning and trauma is very similar. If you've been conditioned, which we all are in our environments, aren't we? That's who we are now, as we're a product of our environments, and we're conditioned to be who we are now. But that doesn't mean your conditioning was trauma. I mean, we can, we need to be mindful of how people live their lives, how communities live their lives, expectations, and how people live their lives. Do we, for instance, from a Western perspective, look at say, I have no idea, so this might sound really wrong, but look at a tribe in the Amazonian rainforest who have no phones and all their only way, their only aspiration is to continue being a part of a community and never move on from that. So we say that they've been traumatized to never realize their potential because they could go out and become a multi-millionaire or something. It's that neglect. because neglect over a period of time can be traumatic to people. So it's kind of like, I feel like there's not enough context used in it, and I hate to. Well, actually, I don't. I'm proud of my career. I'm proud of what the training I've had and the experience I've got, and I think it's valuable. And I think people who dismiss that are usually people who haven't got the experience and feel insecure about their lack of experience. But I feel like when we're looking at trauma, it's really important to identify what trauma is and what isn't, and kind of explore that, and kind of create separations between what it is and what it isn't, because there's again, like, it does to an extent help to form some forms of treatment. Also identify what levels of support need. And I think if we're just saying everything's trauma, then what do we do with that? So I've probably just spoken absolute nonsense for about 10 minutes there, but
I think the thing is, your background, your experience is that if I'm going to listen to anyone talk about trauma, it's going to be you, because you've got that professional background. So that makes a huge difference. And yes, that is me blowing smoke up your ass. Take it.
Yeah, take that gabble, Matt.
Yeah, exactly.
Me, not you.
I think about this in many ways. I think about lots of things in many ways. There's the generational element, as a Gen Xer. Woo. There's things which probably happened in my past, and I know there's things happened in my past which, if I looked at them now, they would probably be classed as trauma. Big things, huge things, but then they weren't. And I remember I read David Treleaven's book on trauma-sensitive mindfulness.
Yeah, trauma-informed mindfulness.
And the reason I read that, doing my PG cert last year, was because I came into the mindfulness space. Let me go throwing coachy words around. The mindfulness space, purely from a place of, this shit's really good, no one could get hurt from it, and then looked at the stuff and went, oh bugger, actually people can get hurt from this. And I love Treleaven's book. It was one of my favorite books that I read last year, because it looked at how one of the issues for him when he was talking about around trauma was this non-integration of trauma into your normal life. These events where something happened, the stress you talk about, if you don't allow it to integrate back into your normal life, you don't give it that chance to kind of smooth off that curve almost, then it does become a traumatic event.
Well, that's why people often mistakenly believe that trauma is the thing, but when actually trauma is the lingering after effects of the thing, usually it happens when people haven't got, as I said earlier, the right community support around them. Like, traumatic stress just takes longer essentially to recover, because it's so traumatic. It's like being hit by a tsunami of stress, usually either in a one-off period or over a long period of time, and it needs time to recover. But to recover, it needs that safe environment. I see a lot of people who struggle with symptoms or struggle with post-traumatic stress, because you look at what happened and you look what followed that. You're like, well, it just was more chaos. No people just dismissing what they're going through. No one around them. So look, they start having nightmares. They might be dissociating when they do get stressed. Things like that, and they may struggle to manage their emotions. So they're like, they use alcohol to manage it, because that's what people often do. Alcohol isn't a necessary problem. Actually, it's a solution for people who haven't been shown the right coping mechanisms. Sometimes people self-harm. Sometimes people take overdoses to manage that. And this is what happens when we haven't got the right environments around us. And that's kind of what I think trauma really needs to be considered. Now, we need to be looked at and acknowledged as being, rather than the event itself. So when people say they all experience trauma, I think everyone experiences setbacks, they all experience stress, but trauma is more about the lingering of it, in my opinion, the lingering effect of that. Because also there'll be people who I see all the time, you go through their history and you go, fuck, man, you have been through a hell of a lot, and they have nothing going on for them right now that's a problem. You go for that, they go, oh, I just dealt with that. And yeah, they might have some stuff, and yes, maybe it may rear its ugly head in the future. But actually, like, people have often will naturally, our bodies are designed to heal, provide them in the right environments to heal. It's like the old metaphor, isn't it, of like water, putting plants in the right environment. If you put a plant in a shitty environment and don't water it and don't give it what it needs, and it dies and wilts and all that stuff. But if you put one in, even if a plant if you knock off a leaf or you knock the head off a flower, if it gets still in the right environment, it grows back, doesn't it? You know, so hopefully, unless it's me looking after the flower, because then they tend to die, or I overwater it like I just did with my girlfriend's plant she got for her birthday. So
we probably need to talk about the aloe that you've got in the background and the one I've got in my background as well.
oh yeah, well, yeah, you know what? I didn't even know what it was. Like my girlfriend keeps saying, "You got that plant in your garden? In your garden, your office," and I was like, "Oh yeah." So, someone told me, I've read somewhere that aloe's now, or aloe vera is now on that is a carcinogen. I was like, oh, all those years I've been rubbing it on my body after that sunburn with my pasty white skin. Not the skin, it's not the sun that's killing me, it's the aloe vera.
So are you telling me that you're actually traumatized by that? Is that?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, I can't sleep. Dissociating.
So what do we do with this trauma stuff then? Because I suppose we should give people who are listening to this, if they've got this far, something useful. I tell you what, yeah, listening to you speak about it and thoughts I've had around it is trauma is a really easy word to grasp. It's very easy. People are using trauma. They're talking about being traumatized. It's something which people identify with. You've got people on social media talking about how something's traumatic. It's very easy to grab that because it's a word which is there and available. And yes, use it too much, it loses its power. For me, it feels like anger, as in, you know, I'm angry. Well, okay, are you angry? Or are there other words which you could describe? And if you look at the emotional wheel, anger sits up here, but what sits underneath anger? It's, you know, it's frustration, it's sadness, it's fear, it's worry, it's rejection, but it's expressed as anger.
Yeah.
Is it something similar with trauma? That we're calling it trauma, but actually it's stress, it's strain, it's life, it's you know, setback, it's something. And by not having the time, like you say, not having the time, not having the environment, not having the people around you, not having the safety, not having the resources, all the actions or activities, in order to be able to deal with that, it's sitting at a much, much higher level. Because, you know, you work with a coach, you work with someone, and you say, this is what I'm feeling at the moment. They'll go, okay, tell me more about it. They'll say, you know, let's investigate this a little bit more. Let's ask a few more questions. So when you say this, tell me what you mean, extrapolate it out. Where someone says, this is traumatic for me, say, okay, cool, I believe you. Absolutely believe you, because you're telling me, and that's what you are subjectively feeling. But what sits underneath that? How have you reached this point where it's traumatic? What else has gone on before? And it's like Lazarus's model of stress. You know, it's the two questions you ask yourself: is it stressful, and can I cope? All done unconsciously, but actually is really good consciously to ask those questions. Because for me, when you start asking those questions and start looking at it more deeply, you realize that probably that thing that you said over here was trauma. Might not be. It might be something else. And then if you call it something else, it brings up other solutions. It brings up other ways of dealing with it. It doesn't have to be. And I could go off, my brain could go off in all kinds of directions here around, you know, the laws that I forgot what it is now. The idea that if you have a big problem, you need a big solution, and trauma is a big problem, so you need a big solution for it. But if it's something else, if it's smaller, if it's got a different name, if it's got something which is less loaded and feels more, you know, in air quotes, normal, then actually maybe you don't need that big solution for it.
And I think the way you used the emotions wheel and described it like that is exactly how we should work with trauma. Like, it's like, you know, we kind of find other words like adversity wheel, like what, you know, we talk about it, what's it called? Emotional granularity is the term they use to, like, you know, so why don't we have adversity granularity? Okay. And of course, when you initially experience something, it's important to acknowledge how you feel. And, you know, something happens, like you stub your toe, you go, fuck, that really hurts, that's the worst, that really hurts, it sucks. But then it fades, right? So I think we need to be wary that, okay, I think that people can acknowledge how it initially feels. But we also need to recognize that, like you've already touched upon, the key to finding solutions and finding answers to our problems is to have the right words to describe that. You know, like you said, if it's everything's trauma, then everything's going to be like, oh my God, I'll never be able to get over this. But if we can find other words to describe ourselves moving forward, then that will also empower us, you know, to take action rather than think it's the worst thing in the world. But on the flip side, I do think people need to be able to use the language, whatever fits for them. But I would say that if as long as it's empowering them. So obviously people say, allow people to use whatever language they want to use to describe the situations they are. But I then think you need to then look at that. Well, if that's the language you're using, what's the results of them using that language? If this is traumatic and it's stopping me from ever doing anything, and of course there are people who are severely impacted by traumatic stress, so we need to be mindful that we're not dismissing these people. But if people are using that as kind of like a crutch, I can't do this because I've experienced trauma. I can't do that but when the reality is maybe they can do something, and most of us can, especially if we've got the right support around us, even if it's a tiny little thing, it's tiny little steps forward all the time. If we're not able to do that because of the language we're using, then we need to look at that and think, do we need to be using better language? In my opinion. I'm sure other people come out and go, yeah, everything's trauma. Everything's trauma.
Well, they can come and talk to us via the comments or the email address, which we'll probably give out, which is wrong, because we haven't got one yet as the point of recording this, or any kind of resources at all for any kind of podcast. But no, it'd be interesting to hear what people think about it. What I will say before we disappear off and say goodbye is that wasn't a traumatic conversation at all.
Well, it wasn't. And I was going to say about trauma, not all mental health problems are caused by trauma. For anyone reads it, that's probably another podcast in itself. But I know that's the flavour of the month, the year at the moment. And so
the flavour. I love it. Right. On to the next one. See you later.
See you later.
So you've been listening to Alex and Dave. And we couldn't actually think of a way to finish off each episode. So Alex is doing his version of Careless Whisper for your listening pleasure. But if you've enjoyed today's episode and you like Alex's musical interlude, then come and tell us. You can find us online somewhere. And if you like what we do, 5-star review would always be good. And share the love.